The phone buzzed against the granite countertop, its screen lighting up with a message that would shatter my world. I wouldn't have noticed it at all if I hadn't been reaching for the salt to season our anniversary breakfast, Ryan's favorite eggs Benedict. His phone usually stayed glued to his hand, but he'd left it behind during his morning shower. Can't wait to see you again. Last night was perfect. Delete this message. My hand trembled as I set down the whisk, hollandaise sauce forgotten. The sender's name read Melissa C. with a small heart emoji beside it. The timestamp showed 6:47 a.m., barely an hour ago. I'm Journey, and until that moment, I thought I knew what my life was. 12 years of marriage, a shared dream home in the suburbs, and plans for starting a family next spring. Now those plans felt like ashes in my mouth. The shower upstairs stopped running. I could hear Ryan's footsteps, the familiar creak of our bedroom floorboards. My fingers hovered over his phone, torn between the urge to dig deeper and the nauseating fear of what else I might find. Something smells amazing down there. Ryan called from upstairs. I swiped through to their message history. Empty. Of course he'd deleted everything else. My husband, the careful man. Always 3 steps ahead. Journey? Did you hear me? Just finishing up, I managed to call back, my voice steadier than I felt. I placed his phone exactly where I'd found it, arranged the breakfast plates, and waited. Ryan appeared in the doorway, hair still damp, wearing the blue button-down I'd given him last Christmas. He smiled, that same smile that had won me over at a mutual friend's barbecue 13 years ago. Now it made my stomach turn. Happy anniversary, beautiful. He wrapped his arms around my waist from behind, pressing a kiss to my neck. I forced myself not to stiffen, to play along. You didn't have to go all out. Apparently not, I murmured, sliding the plates onto our breakfast bar. What was that? Nothing. I smiled, watching him settle onto his usual stool. How was your shower? Good. Quick. He picked up his fork, then frowned at his phone. Did this light up while I was upstairs? Did it? I took a sip of coffee, studying him over the rim of my mug. I didn't notice. Ryan checked his messages, his expression never changing. 12 years together, and I'd never noticed how good he was at keeping his face neutral. What else had I missed? Work stuff, he said, tucking the phone into his pocket. You know how it is. Do I? He paused, fork halfway to his mouth. Everything okay? Who's Melissa? The words escaped before I could stop them, sharp and bitter as the coffee growing cold in my cup. The fork clattered against his plate. Just for a second, panic flashed across his face before that practiced calm returned. A new client. Why? A client who texts you at dawn about perfect nights? My voice didn't even sound like my own anymore. A client who needs you to delete their messages. Journey, I can explain. Please do. I pushed my untouched plate away. Explain how long you've been sleeping with her. Explain why you chose our anniversary morning to be careless enough to leave evidence. Explain how many other perfect nights there have been while I was here, planning our future. It's not what you think. He reached for my hand. I pulled away. Don't. The room felt too small suddenly, the kitchen island between us not nearly wide enough. Don't you dare try to touch me right now. We should talk about this. His tone turned placating, the same voice he used on difficult clients. You're jumping to conclusions. I stood up, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. You're right. We should talk. Maybe we can start with how you'll explain this to your mother at dinner tonight. The color drained from his face. You wouldn't. Wouldn't I? I headed for the stairs, leaving him with his perfect eggs Benedict and his imperfect lies. Happy anniversary, Ryan. I hope she was worth it. The Parker family dining room had always felt warm and inviting, but tonight the air was thick with unspoken accusations. I watched Lena fuss over the table settings, straightening the silverware for the third time while Dylan nursed his scotch in silence. Ryan hadn't arrived yet, probably crafting the perfect excuse for his bandaged hand and the dent in his precious Mercedes. "Journey, dear," Lena's voice wavered slightly. "Are you sure Ryan said he'd be here? It's not like him to be late to family dinner." I took another sip of wine, letting the bitter taste linger. "Oh, he'll be here. He knows what's at stake." The doorbell rang, and Dylan set down his glass with a heavy thud. "I'll get it." But it wasn't Ryan at the door. Instead, Chloe burst in, her face flushed with anger. "I came as soon as I got your text." "That lying piece of..." "Chloe," I cut her off, glancing meaningfully at Lena. "Thank you for coming. I thought I might need a friend tonight." Understanding flickered across her face. She squeezed my hand as she sat beside me, while Lena's worried gaze darted between us. "Is something wrong?" Lena asked. "Did something happen with Ryan's accident?" The front door opened again before I could answer. Ryan stepped in, his right hand wrapped in gauze, his usual confidence dimmed. He froze when he saw Chloe. "What's she doing here?" "Supporting her friend," Chloe replied coldly. "Someone has to." Dylan cleared his throat. "Son, what happened to your hand?" "Car accident," Ryan said quickly. "Minor fender bender." "Journey, can we talk privately?" "No." I smiled, the same practiced smile he'd perfected over years of deception. "Actually, I think we should all hear about your accident. Especially the part about Melissa." Lena's fork clattered against her plate. "Who's Melissa?" "Nobody," Ryan snapped. "A client. Journey's upset over nothing." "Nothing?" I pulled out my phone, pulled up the photo Chloe had sent me an hour ago. "Is that why you wrapped your car around a tree outside her apartment building at midnight? While your wife was sleeping at home? On our anniversary?" The color drained from Ryan's face as I turned the screen toward his parents. The timestamp on the traffic camera photo was clear, 12:17 a.m. The Mercedes, the tree, and a woman in a red dress hurrying away from the scene. "Ryan James Parker," Lena whispered, her voice breaking. "Tell me this isn't what it looks like." "It's complicated," he started, but Dylan cut him off. "Complicated?" Dylan's quiet voice carried more disappointment than anger. "Son, there's nothing complicated about betraying your wife." "You don't understand," Ryan insisted. "Melissa's not just, there are things happening at work." "At work?" I laughed, the sound sharp and hollow. "Is that what you call it?" Because her message this morning seemed pretty clear about where the real work was happening. Chloe's hand tightened around mine as Ryan's facade finally cracked. "You had no right to go through my phone. And you had no right to throw away 12 years of marriage for someone who left you bleeding in your car." The words exploded out of me. All the pain and rage I'd been containing since morning bursting free. "I didn't," he stopped, swallowed hard. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this." "No?" I stood up, my chair scraping against the hardwood. "How was it supposed to happen, Ryan? Were you going to wait until after we started trying for that baby we talked about? Or maybe after I invested my inheritance in your new business venture?" Lena gasped softly, and I saw the moment Ryan realized he'd lost not just me, but his parents too. "Journey, please," he reached for me, but Chloe stepped between us. "Don't you dare touch her. This isn't your business," he snarled at her. "Actually," I pulled out another envelope, "it is. Because while you were busy with Melissa, Chloe was helping me document everything. The late-night meetings, the mysterious withdrawals from our joint account, the calls from unknown numbers." I dropped the envelope on the table. "Happy anniversary, darling. I filed for divorce this afternoon." The silence that followed was deafening. Dylan stood up first, walking to the liquor cabinet for another scotch. Lena dabbed at her eyes with a napkin. And Ryan just stood there, finally speechless, as his carefully constructed world began to crumble. Mom, Dad, I said softly, gathering my purse. I'm sorry you had to find out this way. But I thought you deserved the truth. I headed for the door, Chloe right beside me. And Ryan? Melissa says she's sorry about your hand. But not sorry enough to stick around when the cops showed up. I stood in our bedroom, my bedroom now, staring at the photograph that had slipped from between the pages of Ryan's leather planner. The image was like a knife to the chest, Ryan and Melissa at some rooftop bar, his arm around her waist, both laughing at something beyond the frame. The city lights sparkled behind them like stars, mocking the darkness spreading through my chest. The date stamp in the corner read 3 months ago. Our anniversary dinner at La Maison. The night he'd claimed he had to leave early for an emergency client meeting. My phone buzzed. Another message from Ryan, please come home. We can fix this. Home. I looked around at the carefully curated space we'd built together, the antique dresser we'd found at that estate sale in Vermont. The abstract painting from our honeymoon in Barcelona. Every piece held a memory, and every memory now felt tainted. The doorbell rang, startling me from my thoughts. Through the window, I spotted Chloe's car in the driveway. But there was someone else with her, a slim woman with dark hair who looked vaguely familiar. Journey? Chloe called from downstairs. You need to hear this. I tucked the photograph into my pocket and headed down. The dark-haired woman stood awkwardly in our foyer, wringing her hands. This is Olivia, Chloe said. Melissa's sister. My body went rigid. Get out. Please, Olivia stepped forward. I'm not here for Melissa. I'm here because you need to know the truth about what they're planning. Planning? The word felt bitter on my tongue. The business merger, Olivia said. The one that's going to destroy your husband's company. Chloe touched my arm gently. Let her talk, Journey. I led them to the kitchen, the same space where my world had imploded just days ago. Olivia perched on a bar stool, looking like she might bolt at any moment. Melissa works for Carlton Industries, she began. Has for years. They'd been trying to acquire Parker Tech for months, but Ryan wouldn't sell. What does that have to do with? I stopped, the pieces clicking into place. She was sent to seduce him? Olivia nodded. It's what she does. Gets close to key players, finds their weaknesses, exploits them. But this time. She pulled out her phone, showing me an email chain. This time she's going to destroy him completely. The emails detailed everything, the planned hostile takeover, the fabricated evidence of financial misconduct. The carefully orchestrated scandal that would leave Ryan professionally ruined. Why are you showing me this? My voice sounded distant, hollow. Because I'm tired of cleaning up my sister's messes, Olivia said. And because you deserve to know that Ryan wasn't just unfaithful, he was stupid. He told her everything about the company's vulnerabilities, their security protocols, their client lists. Journey, Chloe interrupted softly. Your inheritance. The room spun slightly. The investment Ryan had been pushing for, the papers still sitting unsigned in my desk drawer. He'd wanted me to sink my entire inheritance into Parker Tech's new security division, the same division that would have been worthless after Carlton's takeover. When? I managed to ask. The board meeting next week, Olivia replied. They're going to present evidence that Ryan's been embezzling funds, force an emergency sale. Melissa's already got copies of documents he signed while. She trailed off, looking uncomfortable. While he was distracted, I finished flatly. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Ryan. I know I messed up, but I need you. The company needs you. Please call me. I showed the message to Olivia, who winced. He knows something's wrong. Melissa's stopped returning his calls. Good. I deleted his message, then looked at Chloe. Call Max. We need a lawyer. Journey, Olivia hesitated. What are you going to do? I pulled out the photograph from my pocket, studying it one last time before ripping it in half. I'm going to beat them at their own game. Ryan wanted to risk my inheritance? Fine. But it's going to cost him everything. Chloe's eyes widened. You have a plan? I do now. I turned to Olivia. But I'll need your help. Both of you. Ryan and Melissa think they're so clever, playing their little games. I smiled, and for the first time in days, it felt real. Let's show them what real manipulation looks like. The charity gala at the Parker Tech headquarters felt like walking into a snake pit. Crystal chandeliers cast deceptively warm light over the crowd of shareholders and board members, all of them circling like vultures, whispering behind champagne flutes. I adjusted my black dress, the one Ryan always said made me look dangerous, and caught his eye across the room. He was standing with Melissa, of course. Her red dress matched the lipstick on his collar from the photo Olivia had shown me earlier. They weren't even trying to hide anymore. Ready? Chloe appeared at my elbow, Max close behind her with a leather briefcase. Almost. I watched Ryan laugh at something Melissa said, his hand lingering on her lower back. Where's Olivia? In position. She has the USB drive with the evidence. Chloe's voice was steady, but her fingers drummed against her clutch nervously. Are you sure about this? Once we start. They're about to destroy everything he built, I cut in. I'm just making sure they destroy each other instead. Max cleared his throat. The board members are gathering. It's time. I moved through the crowd, accepting condolences from people who'd heard about the divorce filing. Ryan tensed as I approached his little circle, but Melissa's smile only widened. Journey, darling, she purred. I didn't expect to see you here. Wouldn't miss it. I turned to the board chairman beside them. Mr. Phillips, I believe you were interested in discussing my investment in the company? Ryan's glass froze halfway to his lips. What? Oh, didn't Melissa tell you? I pulled out the investment papers from my clutch. We had the most fascinating conversation this morning about the company's future. She made quite a compelling case for why I should invest my inheritance now, before the big announcement. Melissa's smile slipped. I don't. In fact, I continued, she explained everything about Carlton Industries' plans. Very thorough, wasn't she, Ryan? Though I suppose you already knew all about that. The color drained from both their faces as phones around the room began buzzing. Right on schedule, Olivia had released the emails to every board member and major shareholder. What did you do? Ryan grabbed my arm, but Max stepped between us. Careful, Max warned quietly. There are cameras everywhere. Melissa was already backing away, her predatory confidence evaporating as board members began turning to stare at her, their phones in hand. It's not what you think, she started, but Phillips cut her off. Is this true? He waved his phone at Ryan. Have you been feeding company information to Carlton? Of course not. Ryan looked desperately between me and Melissa. Journey, whatever you think you know. Oh, I know everything. I smiled, the same smile he'd taught me over 12 years of marriage. The embezzlement scheme, the fake accounts, the planned takeover. Even that interesting transfer to an offshore account last week. Tell me, was that before or after your little accident outside her apartment? Security was moving through the crowd now, heading for Melissa as she edged toward the exit. Ryan reached for me again, his face twisted with rage and fear. You're bluffing. You can't prove. Actually, Olivia's voice rang out as she emerged from the crowd, we can prove all of it. Hello, sister dear. Melissa's composure finally cracked. You little bitch. Careful, I interrupted. The SEC doesn't like it when corporate spies show their temper. Oh, and they're very interested in those documents you had Ryan sign during your private meetings. The security team reached Melissa just as she lunged for her sister. In the chaos that followed, Melissa screaming, Ryan trying to explain to increasingly hostile board members. Phillips calling for an emergency meeting, I felt strangely calm. Journey, Ryan called as I turned to leave. Wait. Please. I can explain everything. I paused, looking back at the man I'd loved for so long. You know what the funny thing is? I actually believe you could explain it. You've always been good at explaining things, Ryan. But I'm done listening. The last thing I saw as the elevator doors closed was Melissa being led away in handcuffs, Ryan standing alone in a circle of accusatory stares. And Olivia raising her champagne glass in a silent toast to the destruction of her sister's carefully laid plans. The police station's interrogation room felt smaller with each passing hour. Detective Santos pushed another cup of coffee across the metal table, her expression unreadable as she reviewed my statement. Let me make sure I understand, she said. You're claiming Miss Carter orchestrated the entire affair to gain access to Parker Tech's confidential information? Yes. I wrapped my fingers around the warm cup, anchoring myself. But that's not why I'm here. No, Santos agreed. You're here because Melissa Carter was found unconscious in her apartment last night. And your soon-to-be ex-husband is missing. The words hung in the air like smoke. Through the one-way glass, I could see Olivia pacing in the hallway, her face pale with worry. She'd called me at midnight, her voice shaking. Melissa's in the hospital. Ryan was at her place. There's something I need to tell you. Miss Parker? Santos leaned forward. Where were you between 10 p.m. and midnight last night? With Chloe Bennett. We were reviewing divorce paperwork. Convenient timing. I met her gaze steadily. Nothing about this has been convenient. The door opened, and Max stepped in, his lawyer mode in full effect. My client has cooperated fully. Unless you're charging her. Not yet. Santos slid a photograph across the table. But we found this in Miss Carter's apartment. My hands trembled as I picked up the image. It showed Ryan and me at our wedding, but my face had been scratched out violently. Scrawled across it in red ink, "She knows too much." That's Melissa's handwriting, I said quietly. Are you sure? Santos asked. Because we found similar notes in your house when we searched it this morning. Along with these. She produced an evidence bag containing letters, dozens of them. My throat tightened as I recognized Ryan's handwriting, mixed with another I didn't know. They go back 6 months, Santos continued. Long before the affair became public. Care to explain? The door burst open before I could respond. Olivia rushed in, ignoring Max's attempt to stop her. You have to tell them, she blurted. About the other women. About what Melissa really did. Santos's eyebrows rose. Other women? Olivia, I warned, but she was already pulling out her phone. Show them the videos, she insisted. The ones Melissa kept. The ones she used to. A commotion in the hallway cut her off. Through the open door, I saw Ryan being led in handcuffs, his face bruised and bloody. Our eyes met for a moment before they took him to another room. Interesting timing, Santos observed. Want to revise your statement? I looked at the evidence spread across the table, the letters, the photo, the lies layered upon lies. Melissa's schemes had run deeper than any of us knew, and now Ryan's blood was quite literally on her hands. Yes, I said finally. But not about last night. About 6 months ago, when Melissa Carter first approached me about helping her take down Parker Tech. Max tensed beside me. Journey, don't. She showed me proof, I continued, ignoring him. About Ryan's other affairs. About the money he'd been stealing. About the women before me who'd tried to expose him and disappeared. I agreed to help her because I thought I was protecting other women. But I didn't know. Didn't know what? That she was one of them. That this whole thing, the affair, the company takeover, even my revenge, was part of her plan all along. I pulled out my own phone. Hands steady now. And I can prove it. Santos studied me for a long moment. Why come forward now? Because Ryan wasn't at Melissa's apartment to hurt her last night. I played the video Olivia had sent me hours ago. He was there to stop her from killing me. The surveillance footage showed Ryan confronting Melissa, her gun visible, their argument silent behind the glass. Then the struggle, the gunshot, Ryan's panic as she fell. Jesus, Santos muttered. So you see, I said quietly, the real question isn't where I was last night. It's why Melissa Carter is still alive when she's tried to kill every other woman who got close to the truth about Parker Tech. And why my husband, who I thought was the villain in this story, just saved my life. The hospital corridor stretched endlessly before me, its fluorescent lights casting harsh shadows across the linoleum. 2 police officers flanked Melissa's door, their expressions hardening as I approached. Through the window, I could see her lying there, tubes snaking from her arms. Looking far more vulnerable than the woman who'd tried to destroy my life. You shouldn't be here, Detective Santos materialized beside me, coffee in hand. It's against protocol. She tried to kill me. And now you're here, alone, in the middle of the night. Santos raised an eyebrow. That doesn't exactly help your case. My phone vibrated, another message from Ryan's lawyer. They'd denied his bail an hour ago. The evidence I provided had helped explain his actions at Melissa's apartment. But 12 years of marriage hadn't prepared me for seeing him led away in handcuffs, his face still bloody from their struggle. I need to talk to her, I said quietly. That's not happening. Santos stepped between me and the door. Go home, Miss Parker. Let us handle this. Like you handled the other cases? I pulled out the file Olivia had given me. Sarah Mitchell, 2018. Rebecca Torres, 2019. Both worked at Parker Tech. Both disappeared after filing harassment claims. Both cases went cold. Santos's expression shifted slightly. Where did you get that? Melissa's laptop. The one Ryan was trying to retrieve when she pulled the gun. I handed her the file. There's more. Much more. But she'll only talk to me. This is blackmail. This is survival. I met her gaze steadily. 5 minutes. That's all I need. The detective studied me for a long moment before nodding to the officers. They stepped aside, and I entered the lion's den. Melissa's eyes opened as I approached her bed. Despite the bruises and bandages, her smile was still razor-sharp. I wondered when you'd come, she whispered. Where are they? Who? Sarah. Rebecca. The others. I moved closer, my voice low. Ryan's in jail because he tried to stop you. The least you can do is tell me the truth. She laughed, the sound hollow and harsh. The truth? You wouldn't recognize it if it slapped you in the face. Your perfect husband, your perfect marriage, it was all a lie long before I came along. What are you talking about? Ask him about Project Phoenix. She shifted, wincing. Ask him why those women really disappeared. Ask him why he married you in the first place. My blood ran cold. What does that mean? It means, she reached for something under her pillow, that you're not the hero of this story, journey. You're just another pawn. The flash of metal was my only warning. I lunged backward as the scalpel sliced through the air where my throat had been. Melissa's monitor began screaming as she launched herself from the bed, medical equipment crashing around us. He chose you because you were convenient, she snarled, swinging again. Because your father's company had what Parker Tech needed. I stumbled against the wall as Santos burst in, weapon drawn. Drop it. Tell her. Melissa's eyes were wild, blood seeping through her hospital gown. Tell her about the merger papers her father signed the day before his accident. The scalpel clattered to the floor as she collapsed, orderlies rushing in with restraints. But her words had found their mark more effectively than any blade. My father's death. The convenient timing of meeting Ryan. The rushed marriage that had surprised everyone. All of it suddenly viewed through a new, horrifying lens. Journey? Santos touched my arm. Are you alright? I shook my head, unable to speak. My phone buzzed again, not Ryan's lawyer this time, but Olivia. Found something in Melissa's storage unit, her message read. About your father. You need to see this now. As they wheeled Melissa away, her laughter echoing down the corridor. I realized that my quest for revenge had led me somewhere far darker than I'd imagined. The truth about Ryan, about my father's death, about my entire marriage, it was all connected to something much bigger than a simple affair. And now I had to decide, keep digging and risk losing everything I thought I knew about my life, or walk away and live with the questions forever. The visiting room at the county jail felt smaller than it had any right to be. Ryan sat across from me, the bruises on his face faded to sickly yellows and greens. Between us lay the contents of Olivia's discovery, my father's autopsy report, Project Phoenix files. And a USB drive that had destroyed every certainty I'd ever had about my marriage. How long? My voice didn't shake. I was proud of that. Journey. How long were you planning it before my father died? He leaned forward, chains rattling against the metal table. It wasn't supposed to happen that way. The brake lines. That wasn't part of the plan. But marrying his daughter was? I pushed the merger documents toward him. Making sure his company fell into Parker Tech's hands after his convenient accident. I loved you. His eyes met mine, and for the first time in 12 years, I saw real desperation there. That wasn't part of the plan either. Don't. I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping against concrete. Don't you dare pretend. It's the truth. He tried to reach for me, but the chains stopped him. Everything changed after I met you. Why do you think Melissa targeted me? She knew I'd stopped pushing forward with Phoenix because of you. The door opened behind me. Detective Santos stepped in, holding a phone. We found Sarah Mitchell. My heart stopped. Alive? She nodded. In witness protection. She's willing to testify about Phoenix, about Parker Tech's involvement in corporate espionage. And about your father's murder. Ryan's face went slack. You don't understand what you're doing. These people. These people? I laughed, the sound brittle as glass. You mean your father? Dylan's fingerprints are all over these documents. He ordered the hit on my father, didn't he? And you just played along, seduced the grieving daughter to keep her quiet. To protect you. He slammed his hands down, making Santos step forward. Once you were part of the family, you were safe. As long as you didn't know. Safe? I pulled out my phone, showing him the security footage from my house. Is that why Melissa broke in last night? Why she tried to access my father's old files? He went very still. When was this? 3 hours ago. Chloe's watching the house now. Waiting. Call her. His voice turned urgent. Now. Get her out of there. They're not after the files, Journey. They're after you. Santos was already on her radio, but I knew it was too late. My phone buzzed with Chloe's text, company's here. Dylan and 3 others. Following the plan. You knew. Ryan's accusation cut through my rising panic. You're using my father's predictability against him. Like father, like son. I gathered the documents, leaving one photo behind, our wedding day. The last picture taken of me smiling genuinely at the man I thought I loved. The difference is, I learned from the best how to play the long game. Journey, please. Real fear crept into his voice. Whatever you're planning is already done. I nodded to Santos, who produced an arrest warrant. The FBI is raiding Parker Tech right now. Every document, every file about Phoenix, about my father. It's all going public. Dylan's walking into a trap, and Melissa's testimony from the hospital was the final nail in the coffin. You'll destroy everything. No, I corrected him quietly. You did that 12 years ago when you chose your father's corruption over the truth. I'm just finishing what you started. My phone buzzed again, the signal. Somewhere across town, Dylan Parker was being led away in handcuffs, his corporate empire crumbling around him. And in a hospital room, Melissa Carter was signing a full confession, her immunity deal secured by the evidence she'd helped me gather. For what it's worth, I said, pausing at the door, I loved you too. That's what made it so easy to make you believe I was still the same naive girl you married. The last thing I saw as the door closed was understanding dawning in his eyes, the realization that his perfect, trusting wife had orchestrated his downfall from the moment she found that first text message, playing every player at their own game. Some might call it revenge. I called it justice. The courtroom emptied slowly, leaving me alone with the echo of the judge's verdict. Guilty on all counts: corporate espionage, conspiracy, murder. The Parker family legacy, dismantled in less than 2 hours. I gathered my belongings, fingers brushing against my father's old watch in my purse. The evidence had proven what I'd suspected. He'd discovered Project Phoenix, threatened to expose it, and paid with his life. Now, 12 years later, justice had finally been served. Miss Parker? I turned to find Lena standing in the doorway, looking smaller somehow without her usual perfect posture and designer clothes. I'm not here to defend them, she said quickly. I needed you to know I had no idea about any of it. I believe you. The words surprised us both with their sincerity. She nodded, twisting her wedding ring, a nervous habit I'd never noticed before. The house in Vermont. The one you loved so much. I'm signing it over to you. Lena. Please. Her voice cracked slightly. Let me do this one thing right. The door opened again before I could respond. Olivia entered, followed by Sarah Mitchell, alive, whole, and ready to rebuild her life now that her testimony had helped bring down Parker Tech. The reporters are waiting, Olivia warned. And Melissa's lawyer called. She wants to meet. No. I shouldered my bag, feeling lighter somehow. Tell her I'm done playing her games. She got her deal, she can live with the consequences of her choices. Just like the rest of us. Lena touched my arm gently as I passed. What will you do now? The question should have felt heavy, but instead it tasted like freedom. My father's company is being restored to its original shareholders. There's work to be done, wrongs to right. Journey. She hesitated. Ryan asked to see you. One last time, before they transfer him. I thought of our last conversation in that prison visiting room, of all the lies and truths tangled together across 12 years of marriage. Of the man I'd loved and the monster he'd protected. Of the naive wife I'd pretended to be while methodically dismantling their empire. Tell him. I smiled, genuine for the first time in months. Tell him I learned from the best. Outside, Chloe waited by her car, holding a thick envelope. The last of the evidence files. Detective Santos says we're officially done. Not quite. I took the envelope, then handed her a different one. The foundation paperwork. For the victims of corporate fraud and whistleblower protection. I need a director I can trust. Her eyes widened. Journey. You stood by me through all of it, I said quietly. Help me make sure no one else has to go through this alone. The late afternoon sun caught the face of my father's watch as I checked the time. Somewhere across town, Dylan Parker was beginning his life sentence. Ryan would soon join him. Melissa's immunity deal would keep her out of prison, but her reputation was destroyed. The mighty had fallen, and the truth had finally come to light. You know, Chloe said as we drove away from the courthouse, most people would feel vindicated right now. Triumphant. I watched the city scroll past, thinking of all the moments that had led to this one. The breakfast I'd been preparing when I found that first text. The family dinner where everything began to unravel. The hospital room where Melissa had finally revealed the truth about my father's death. I don't feel triumphant, I admitted. I feel free. Awake. I turned to her, understanding flowing through me like a river breaking through ice. For 12 years, I lived someone else's version of my life. Now I get to discover who I really am. And who is that? I thought of Lena's gift, the house in Vermont where I'd once dreamed of raising a family. Of Sarah Mitchell, alive and ready to reclaim her story. Of my father's company, waiting to be rebuilt into something honest and true. Someone who knows the difference between revenge and justice, I said finally. And chooses justice every time. The city stretched out before us, full of possibilities and second chances. Not an ending, but a beginning, one entirely of my own making.